used to believe every love story had a defining moment, a slow-motion scene you'd carry with you forever, a before and after you could circle on a calendar. What I didn't know was that mine would be defined in silence, in the pause at the top of the stairs, in a handful of words that would unmake my entire world. Connor and I met at a charity gala, the kind of event where everyone sipped sparkling water and swapped stories about who they knew. He made a joke about the sculptures being modern art torture devices, and I laughed far too loud for my mother's liking. He just grinned at me, and I saw instantly how easy life could be with someone like him. He didn't flinch in a room full of people with money, but he didn't chase after them either. We started dating quietly. By the time my family noticed, he was already a fixture in our lives, fixing my mom's kitchen sink, going golfing with my dad, making himself indispensable in ways that felt like love. He proposed under the fairy lights in my parents' garden. I said yes, and for 3 years, I believed in his words, his vows, the gentle way he touched me in the mornings, hair mussed and eyes still blurry with sleep. My friends never quite said what they thought, but I could read it in their careful smiles. Connor didn't come from our world. He'd grown up 2 towns over, his father a high school coach, his mother a nurse. I'd grown up never having to check price tag, though we weren't the yacht club kind of rich, just safe, comfortable, insulated from real risk. After the wedding, life fit together as smoothly as our hands at a dinner party. We renovated the guest bathroom, adopted a cat, threw little dinner parties with our friends and his colleagues. He always wanted more for us, he said. I paid off his student loans, not all at once, but over the span of a year, telling myself that's what partnership was for. The cracks were papered over by traditions, weekly date nights, annual vow renewals, handwritten love notes slipped into pockets. Maybe that's why I clung so hard to normal, even after the night my whole story started to unravel. It was supposed to be a girls' trip to Nashville. Me, Scarlett, Tina, and Jules, my best friends since college, wild and scattered all over the country, but always drawn back together by ritual. We planned the trip for months, matching t-shirts, Instagrammable brunches, late-night dancing, spa days. I looked forward to it more than Christmas. When everything started falling apart, Scarlett's food poisoning, Tina's last-minute work drama, no one wanted to admit we were all miserable. I tried to rally, suggesting we do something reckless, but in the end we made excuses and broke it off early. I booked an early flight home, texting Connor with jokes about missing his terrible attempts at homemade pizza, thinking the best surprise would be my own return. That day, Nashville was humid and scented with disappointment. By the time I landed at home, I was running on 3 hours of sleep and 4 cups of airport coffee, clutching a greasy takeout bag of nachos, Connor's favorite, and 2 bottles of that boutique craft beer he pretended to be an expert on. The house was quiet when I let myself in through the garage, shivering with anticipation. Every part of me was hopeful. He'd laugh, he'd hug me close, he'd tell me it wasn't the same without me. I crept through the kitchen, set down the food, and started toward the stairs. I could hear his voice upstairs, a low rumble punctuated by laughter echoing down the hall. I listened, just for a second, I swear, just enough to guess if I should burst in or wait till he hung up. His words at first made no sense, a surreal mismatch with everything I believed. Marriage is a complete nightmare, bro. I wake up every day regretting my decision. If it wasn't for her family's money, I'd be gone already. I teetered on the edge of the stairs, every muscle in my body locked. He wasn't laughing. He kept talking, his tone both bitter and matter-of-fact. The only good thing about any of this is not having to worry about bills anymore. Her dad's gonna bring me into the family business next year. Once I'm established, I'll have options, more than just being the money wife's husband. I thought about storming in, throwing the beer at his head, making him face me. Instead, I turned on jelly legs, slipped back down the stairs, and left. I don't remember grabbing my purse or what I said to the takeout guy when I returned the food, some kind of lame excuse about a sick husband. I spent 2 hours motionless in my car, mascara streaming, throat burning, watching the world go about its stupid, normal business. I lied to my friends, telling them I'd decided to stay in a hotel near the airport and work. That night, I slept in a towel, staring at the patterned ceiling, shaking with anger and humiliation. Every warm memory, every sweet word, rewound now in a new, ugly tint, a performance. The next morning, I drove back to Nashville and slid into my old life with practiced ease, even as something inside me had snapped and shriveled to a hard kernel of rage. For 3 days, I acted like myself, the perfect vacation Natalie, drinking too much, laughing with my friends, all the while holding my own pain at arm's length. When it was time to come home, I did everything exactly right. I walked in on schedule, kissed Connor, asked about his week, and let him hold me close without flinching. This too was a performance. I learned it quickly. I spent 5 days sleeping beside a man I now knew despised me, if not me, then what I represented. Every morning, I watched him pour my coffee. Every evening, listened to him ask about my family. Everything became suspicious. The way he complimented my dad's new suit, asked about my mother's health, seemed to take sudden interest in my sister's career. Nothing escaped my notice. I checked our accounts. Withdrawals, little ones, just under the threshold that would require him to notify me. 200 here, 300 there, always breezily explained away if I questioned it. I stopped talking about money, let the script play out. I paid special attention to the weekend trips he suggested, the expensive vacations, the subtle pushes when he wanted my family to foot the bill. When Connor asked if I wanted to go away for a week weekend to reconnect, he said, as if he'd sensed something. My stomach twisted in revulsion, and I forced a smile. Let's go to the cabin on the lake instead of the resort, I offered. Watching his face cycle through disappointment, recovery, then brittle enthusiasm almost made me laugh out loud. At the cabin, our Wi-Fi barely worked. Connor paced the dock for signal, irritated, checking his phone like he was waiting for a rescue. He slipped away twice for calls, once returning sweaty and annoyed. That night, he asked about my dad's business, testing for cracks. I fed him a lie about dad scaling back, maybe delaying plans to bring Connor in. His eyes flicked, calculating. On the drive home, I felt like a movie villain, calm, precise, untouchable. It was Connor who seemed on edge. What followed were days of documentation. I started gathering evidence, making lists on my phone, account numbers, password changes, texts from the friend I trusted with my truth. I pocketed cash, moved sentimental jewelry out of our house under the guise of a photo shoot, and started lunching with Loretta, my best friend, every week for moral support. I let things break: the sink, the fridge, the porch light, calling strangers to fix them while Connor watched in baffled silence, his role as household fixer quietly vanishing. When he tried to touch me, I'd step away and claim tiredness. He started fixing things himself with a frantic energy, desperate to prove his worth. He called me 27 times in 1 hour after he accidentally found printouts of our joint account withdrawals on the desk. When I called him back, he was shaking, voice tight. Are you mad at me? Did something happen with your family? I played it cool. Just busy at Target. Why? A pause. No reason. I just love you. I nearly laughed. Instead, I said, love you too, the lie tasting bitter. My plan was almost complete. A slow retreat, the kind you make when leaving a burning building. No confrontation, not until I had every piece in place. But it was killing me. This act, this invention of a happy wife, the slow death of every moment I'd ever trusted another person. The next few weeks became a lesson in self-control, the art of pretending while quietly rearranging the chessboard. I barely recognized myself in the mirror. Eyes sharper, smile thinner, shoulders squared against the weight of secrets. Every tiny detail mattered. I changed passwords, started moving little sums from our joint account into my own, enough to keep his suspicions asleep, but enough, I hoped, to leave me solvent when the storm broke. I dug through the past, combing our statements for patterns. It felt like an out-of-body experience, discovering the numbers that spelled out his betrayal, withdrawals aligned with his visits home, receipts for bars and restaurants nowhere in our budget. Some nights I couldn't sleep, so I paced the house, counting the steps between our bedroom and my car, rehearsing what I'd take and what I'd leave if I had to run. Then I found his second phone, tucked away in his nightstand, a disposable prepaid with one contact, D. The code was written on a sticky note. Sometimes a person's carelessness is as loud as a confession. I took pictures of every message, meetings, money transferred, references to a long-term plan, to us being set in 2 years, a blueprint for escape, for a future that didn't include me. Loretta, my best ally, showed me how to document everything. Screenshots, photos, notes, even recordings if I could get them. We met for coffee twice a week under the pretense of work, planning my freedom between sips of latte and nervous laughter. Connor, meanwhile, became an actor in a desperate drama. He scrambled to fix what he'd neglected for months: leaky faucets, squeaky doors, burnt-out bulbs. He'd cook my favorite dinners, hover closer in the evenings, invent conversations about our future. He pawed through my closet, scrolled through my iPad, tried to catch me glancing at my phone when he thought I wasn't looking. Every ounce of distance seemed to drive him mad. He never said a word about money, but he asked about my parents and their business, always with an edge I recognized now as desperation. When I mentioned my dad was rethinking some ventures, an invented crisis, Connor drilled me for details. Suddenly, the man who feigned indifference to wealth and status couldn't hide his hunger. Around this time, the 27 calls happened. One morning, I'd left printouts from our joint account on my desk, highlighting his withdrawals. By the end of my meetings, my phone had lit up like a nerve ending. Connor cycling through panic and affection, begging for a cue. I played dumb, blaming busyness, watched as hope flickered in his eyes, hope that I still didn't know. I started acting my own part, a little less loving, a little more distracted. Calls taken privately in the bathroom, words dropped about meeting with the family lawyer, just loud enough for him to overhear, just vague enough to plant seeds of dread. Each evening, I laid in bed, planning the next step, heart pounding with excitement and grief. When we attended a dinner party at Scarlett's house, Connor's least favorite friend, he played the perfect spouse, laughed at her jokes, complimented her taste that he'd always mocked. When someone brought up a story about a husband fleecing his wealthy wife, the room burst into laughter. I watched Connor flinch, saw him lose himself in mashed potatoes as the whole table commented on how clueless some people could be. On the drive home, he turned to me, eyes wide and searching. Is everything okay between us? I stared directly back, feeling the power of truth and silence. Maybe you should check your conscience if you feel something's wrong. He said nothing, settled into a brooding stillness that lasted all night. The morning of the confrontation, sunlight poured through the kitchen window with its usual cheerfulness. It felt almost cruel. I dressed with steady hands, every step deliberate, sensible flats, favorite earrings, wedding band still on my finger, one final costume for an audience that would see every truth. My parents arrived just before 10, my father's jaw set hard, my mother's hands trembling as she smoothed my hair and blinked away the shine in her eyes. Connor was all smiles, nerves betraying him only in the way he refilled his coffee cup 3 times before Mr. Bradshaw, our family's financial advisor, arrived with his briefcase and pointed looks. We gathered in my father's study. The room smelled like old books and the lemon oil my mother dabbed on the desk drawers. Connor sat beside me, close but not touching. My dad cleared his throat and fixed Connor with a gaze I'd only seen him use in business negotiations. Connor, before we begin, is there anything you'd like to tell us? Connor's confusion was pure. No, everything's great. I'm grateful for all the opportunities you've given me, sir. My dad nodded and produced a folder. Printouts of the account withdrawals, screenshots of messages from the second phone, a transcript of the overheard call. He placed them before Connor, stone-faced. We've noticed some issues with the finances, and we've heard some things that don't match what you've told us. Connor paged through the evidence, his confidence visibly draining. He looked desperately at me, but I kept my eyes calm, steady. No rescue this time. He opened his mouth to deny everything, still trying to play to his audience, but my mother cut him off. Connor, I want the real truth. Did you ever love my daughter, or was this all just for money? A beat of silence. Then he broke. Tears, apologies spilling out in a clumsy torrent. I watched him shapeshift. Every confession practiced, every cry a last-ditch effort to reclaim sympathy. It was just a hard time. Sometimes I said things I didn't mean. Natalie, you know I love you, don't you? I shook my head, voice finally steady after weeks of practice. No, you loved what I could give you. Maybe you even convinced yourself that was the same thing. My father ended it. You're being removed from all our financial arrangements. The lawyers will be in touch about the rest. Natalie deserves a future free from deception. You can collect your things by tomorrow. The meeting ended with paperwork and a sudden hush. Connor left with my father, his protests muted, his plans unraveling faster than he could grasp. Mr. Bradshaw squeezed my hand gently, and my mother hugged me so tightly I almost wept for the girl I had been. So desperate to be loved, she'd miss the truth every time it was plain before her. That afternoon, as Connor packed what he could carry, I sat on our porch and let the quiet sink in. There was no joy, no grim satisfaction, just bone-deep relief and exhaustion. When the moving van pulled away, I curled into myself and let the tears come, not for Connor, not for what we'd lost, but for all that I'd given to a story that wasn't real. I rode the wave of anger and heartbreak through the first days after Connor left. My phone was a battlefield. Messages from Loretta and Scarlett, sympathetic calls from my mother, ominous emails from lawyers. Connor sent me flowers, handwritten notes that stank of desperation, apology texts that veered from pleading to blaming in a single breath. I read every one, letting each syllable remind me why I was done playing the wife he wanted. I did not answer. The legal process was swift and brutal, made easier by the evidence and my family's protection, but every mediation felt like reopening a wound. Connor claimed he deserved half of everything, tried to paint himself as a victim of my family's power, even argued emotional distress and ruined future business prospects. His bravado collapsed the moment my lawyer played the recording from his secret phone. In those moments, I found a strength I never knew I had. Watching his face when the lies became irrefutable, I realized Connor wasn't ever going to be the man I'd convinced myself to love. He was a performer, clever, careful, maybe even convincing, but never truly present. Packing up our house was like exorcising a ghost. Every room was layered in memories and accusation. I labeled boxes unemotionally, sorted what was mine from the pieces he'd never cared about. On my last night in the house, I walked room to room. Kitchen, guest bath, our old bedroom, the entryway with that engraved sign his parents gave us, where your story begins. I realized I had a story, but it wasn't the one Connor thought he was writing. Moving into my own apartment, a small, sunlit place downtown, felt like starting life in miniature. I decorated without compromise, filled bookshelves with novels and cookbooks, laughed uproariously at random TikToks without a single apology. For the first time in years, I set my own alarm, cooked for myself, and let silence feel restorative rather than sad. Loretta came over the first weekend with takeout and a bottle of wine. "You seem different," she said, turning the cork in her hands. I smiled. I am different. I'm done accepting so little. I kept up with therapy, finding value in each uncomfortable truth. My therapist pushed me to really examine my own patterns, to care for myself the way I'd always cared for everyone else. We made lists, small victories, big regrets, the things I wanted in my next chapter. Trust would be hard, but I was learning that trusting myself came first. My family, relieved but changed, rallied around me in unexpected ways. My dad apologized for not protecting me. Mom texted me daily with money articles and unsolicited dating advice. Scarlett and Loretta plotted girls' nights and convinced me to join a painting class. Connor, ever persistent, tried to return, offering letters, gifts, even turning on the tears that once might have worked. This time, I saw him for the man he was, a performer who'd lost his crowd. I refused every meeting, shredded every apology, let his words fade into the ether. Some days I woke full of grief for the promise I'd believed in, for the years spent loving a shadow. But as autumn shifted to winter, the pain began to dull. I read more, walked everywhere, made mushroom risotto 3 times before it stopped tasting like loneliness and started tasting like possibility. Jules and Tina stopped by for coffee one afternoon, the conversation easy and full of the future. I told them about my new place, about how good it felt to laugh with without fear. Jules smiled. You always deserved this, you just had to remember. The divorce finalized faster than anyone expected, and Connor disappeared from my life like a bad dream finally forgotten. His social media boasted new romances, new schemes, but I no longer cared about his plots or performances. I found peace in the fact that he was no longer my problem. I wasn't healed, not fully, trust would take time. But the apartment grew warmer, the days grew lighter, and bit by bit, I stopped holding my breath. I was no longer the money wife. I was Natalie again, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Spring melted into summer, and little by little, my new life started to grow roots. I filled the quiet of my apartment with the hum of new rituals, fresh coffee at sunrise, long walks by the river after work, painting on Saturday mornings even though every canvas was more mess than masterpiece. The routines I used to share with Connor faded, replaced by a kind of gentle solitude, sometimes lonely, but rarely sad. For weeks, grief was my constant shadow. There were moments I felt swallowed whole by what I'd lost, not just the marriage, but the vision of myself I'd fought for. I mourned a future that would never be, the children we'd named but never tried for, the vacations planned in hopeful fits of optimism. Nights were hardest. I'd reach for my phone out of habit, find my thumb hovering over his name, willing myself not to relive the past. But each day something shifted, tender and slow. I laughed louder, found myself singing off-key with the windows open. I made friends with my neighbor, a retiree named Jean, who baked astonishing lemon bread and insisted I join her book club. For the first time, the stories I read on those lazy Sunday afternoons felt like doors opening, not escapes. My family rallied behind me in ways I hadn't expected. Mom's blind date attempts multiplied, but I dodged each one with careful gratitude. Dad was gentler, more open, his guilt about what happened slowly transforming into quiet support. Sometimes we'd walk together, speaking little, letting the shared silence fill with new trust. Loretta came by almost every week, arms loaded with groceries or a new bottle of wine. We cooked together, swapped stories, sometimes getting teary-eyed when talk turned serious. She was my anchor, reminding me that the person I was now was braver than the wife I'd been. Friends drifted back into my orbit, their concern morphing into admiration. I confessed things I'd hidden for years, not just about Connor, but about shame, self-doubt, the ways I'd let myself shrink to fit someone else's plans. Scarlett, bold as ever, took me dancing. Jules convinced me to try yoga, laughing at my complaints about downward dog. Therapy sessions gradually became less about grief and more about possibility. My therapist asked me, "What does joy look like for you now?" Sometimes I couldn't answer, but the question sent me hunting for it in tiny moments. The tang of citrus on my tongue, the crisp sheets on my bed, laughter with my mother in the kitchen. Each instance was a small rebellion against the story Connor tried to write me into. Occasionally, reminders of the past would arrive uninvited. A letter from Connor, quickly shredded, a whispered rumor, quickly forgotten. I encountered old acquaintances at the grocery store, their sympathy tinged with curiosity. I smiled, responded with honesty, then kept moving. Connor's shadow was only as heavy as I let it be. By late summer, my anger dulled to indifference. I wasn't healed. There were nights I cried, wishing for answers I'd never get, but each morning felt lighter, each day brighter. I signed up for cooking classes, learned to make things I'd never tried before. I reconnected with hobbies discarded during marriage, photography, hiking, the occasional road trip with friends. One afternoon, Jean's book club read a novel about reinvention and starting over. As we discussed the protagonist's courage, Jean squeezed my hand and whispered, "You know you're doing it, right?" I nodded, eyes stinging, suddenly grateful for the messy, imperfect road I was on. I still didn't know what lay ahead. I didn't know when I would trust again, or if I even wanted to try. But I did know this. I was no longer living in someone else's lie. The money wife was gone. Natalie, laughing, fierce, hopeful, remained. And as the seasons shifted, so did I. The first anniversary after the divorce passed quietly, marked only by a private celebration of survival. I lit a single candle, made steak and asparagus for myself, and toasted to the fact that my life was finally, truly mine. I no longer flinched at my reflection or second-guessed every decision. The apartment felt lived in, shoes by the door, mismatched mugs, a scatter of half-read books on the coffee table. There was no one left to please but myself. A sense of freedom blossomed in unexpected ways. On mornings off, I drove to small neighboring towns, wandering art galleries and antique shops, sometimes buying things just because they made me happy. One rainy Wednesday, I signed up for a photography hike and found myself in a circle of strangers, comparing lenses and stories while golden light fractured through storm clouds. I found beauty in being ordinary. I tried new restaurants alone, savoring the hush and bustle. At a rooftop bar, I sat with a notebook and wrote lists, things I wanted to try, places I wanted to visit. I watched couples at other tables, some laughing, some silent, and let hope gently brush the edges of my heart without asking for answers. Slowly, I rebuilt my relationship with my parents, not as the child they felt the need to protect, but as the grown daughter they could talk to about politics, history, and the wild turns life can take. My dad confessed things he'd never shared, his worries, regrets, the ways he'd once felt lost behind his own success. My mother brought her guard down, confided fears of her own, and together we learned how to love each other through uncertainty. Scarlett and Loretta steered every girls' night with stubborn cheer. A trivia contest here, a weekend retreat there, the kind of friendship forged in the fire of shared secrets. We laughed about dating mishaps, congratulated Sarah on her promotion, cried together when Jules finally opened up about her own rocky marriage. Friendship became my lifeline, thick and resilient. Therapy morphed into coaching, my sessions filled with talk of ambition, not loss. I set goals, not just for healing, but for joy. 2 vacations per year, 1 new skill every season, the courage to say yes when fear still lingered. My therapist challenged me to see myself outside of heartbreak, to believe I could build again. It was almost a year after Connor's departure when possibility found me, not as romance, but as a sense of contentment that didn't depend on anyone's approval. I hosted my first dinner party, all mismatched chairs and laughter that ricocheted off the walls. Jean brought lemon bread, Loretta a bottle of champagne. We raised glasses to futures that weren't mapped out, to loving ourselves fiercely, flaws and all. Occasionally, news of Connor reached me, the charity gala circuit, another wealthy girlfriend whose story faintly echoed mine. I felt pity more than anger, grateful for lessons hard won. Denise, his old flame, sent a single Instagram message. Good luck, you'll need it. But I left it unanswered. My energy was for myself now. Bad days lingered, some sharp, some dull. On the anniversary of our vow renewal, I drove to the family cabin alone and watched the sunrise, letting grief and gratitude braid together. I wrote letters I never sent, burned painful photographs, let the silence remind me of who I was before and who I could still become. I made a promise to choose myself even when love knocked again, to trust my own heart before giving it away. Whether partnership or solitude, I would never again buy someone's version of happiness at the cost of my own. Time passed, a year, then 2. The money wife became a closed chapter, the scars fading with each small act of courageous joy. I cultivated peace, found beauty in beginnings, and finally allowed happiness to arrive on its own terms.